up. We have there's 281 people registered for this. I'm going to click 0 on. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight or whenever it is you're watching. If you're watching us live, hello. If you're not, leave us a little comment on whether you're watching the replay or you're watching live. And definitely let us know where you're tuning in from for Getting Organized in January. It's sort of a cumbersome title. Really, this is the prequel to Free February, where we are going to make use of all of those scraps we've got lying around. I know you've got bins of scraps. I've got bins of scraps. And, you know, for a long time, I thought I was doing the right thing by at least keeping them. But look at the shape my scraps are in. You know, this is kind of just what am I going to do with this? We are going to figure out what to do with this starting tonight. We've got 2 live classes in January, and then we start Free February, where we're going to follow along in the Scrappiness is Happiness book by Lori Holt. And she's got so many great tips and techniques, along with 32 quilt patterns, all using, look at this, all using up your scraps. It's an absolutely gorgeous book. So we can put a link up to the book if you want to get it. We can send it to you, or you can just follow along and pick up the tips that we're going to have for you here tonight. And as Free February and our Getting Organized event rolls on, I want to welcome Amanda Brown, who's here with us tonight. She's a Janome educator. Hi, Amanda.
Hello. So happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you. I know your drawers or bins look better than this. I'm sure of it.
Not always. Not always. Today, I took some time, so yes.
It's a work in progress keeping up to date with your scraps, isn't it?
It is, and I find that I have a system that sort of works, and then I just keep on refining it. And I get really excited when my scrap pile goes down. Like, it seems like an accomplishment.
I have to make a confession. I've never once made an entire quilt out of my scraps. Like I've used them for like a little thing here and there. And that's a big problem because I'm telling you, some of my boxes are like absolutely overflowing. And I thought I was doing well just by color sorting them, but it's really not enough.
No. And it's really hard to do an entire quilt, but I have done a couple over the years where it's majority of the like key fabrics are scraps, but then I have like one solid background or some sort of background that I have to add in because you just don't have enough of it.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Like I kind of think I would still count it as a scrap quilt, even if you had to provide the background and obviously the backing. And if you're wanting the full kit that we've got, which includes the book, you're going to get like a bottle of flatter, some zippers, because we're going to make some pouches. There's stabilizer in there, things that will help you supplement you using up your scraps. You can go for the full kit. If you go to shop@homemade.ca, we have a few books left, and we have a few more coming in on order in the next. We were told that they've gone out to us, so we'll be getting them right out to you if you've ordered the book. I think we've got 11 more coming, and then that's it. It'll be sold out. So yeah, let's get started. We've got lots of amazing tips. What I want to just, if anybody is new here, please let us know if this is your first time watching one of our shows, because welcome. We love having new people in, and then we'll get to know you a little bit, because we tend to see some familiar names coming up week after week, and we love building this community. So if you're new, please let us know if this is your first time or your first event. We'd love to hear from you, and let us know where you're watching from. So Amanda and I have compiled sort of, some tips for you guys. We're going to go through a little bit of our own sorting systems, and all the ways, mostly me, have been like completely neglectful, and, I'm really dropping the ball. Like, what am I contributing? I'm just kidding. We have an inside joke going.
You're good.
Yeah. This white box here, for example, a few years back, like every year I try to around this time of year, like most of you, Kathy, first timer. Hi, Kathy. That's great. And we've got many familiar names. I'm seeing Penny. I saw Marie Agnes. Cindy's here from Ontario. We're in Kingston, Ontario. Penny got a new place in PEI. It's amazing. There's Donna. Yes, I have had a busy day. Maybe some of you were watching this morning. I was up and so was Amanda, at 3:30 on the way to Toronto to do the morning show. Robin's here from Texas. She's always in our events. That's great. Hi, Pearl. We've got first time watching. Now, sometimes I don't see your names come up. On your end, you might see register with StreamYard. That's not spam. That's the system we're using. So if you register with them, it's really just put your name in. Then I'll be able to see your name and see your question. Otherwise, it just says Facebook user, and I don't know who you are. But I see Tracy Harling is on from Nipissing. We've got someone from Chatham.
Someone was saying good morning from Australia earlier.
Go slide back up. Let's see. Good morning from Australia. That's great.
It's a whole new day there.
Diane, we've got Diane. That's great. Humboldt, Texas. That's Robin. Chatham. This is great. Hi, Kathy. We're going to do so much good organizing. And like I was saying, every year around this time, last year I did what I called the Great Craft Room Cleanup, where really I just had to clean up this mess of a craft room. I mean, you guys know, it's like once you get going on these projects, and then God forbid another one takes over, then you're really going down that slippery slope of, you might not ever dig out, Amanda?
Oh yeah. Like, I have such a tiny studio, you're seeing most of it, that I constantly am finding new ways to organize stuff, because this stuff is taking over my closet. Like, I have given up clothing space for most of my stuff now. Like, who needs clothes?
I mean, Not to mention, I mean, you're one of the lucky ones. I know I'm lucky to have a separate space. Lots of us are, when we started too, sewing on our dining room table or on the spare table in the basement or whatever. So no matter where you are, whether you have a separate space, whether you have just a storage bin, there are ways that we're going to be able to get you using your scraps and not always having to buy more fabric. Well, hell, buy more fabric. Get more fabric. We all love fabric, don't get me wrong. But at least also be using what you have, because some of the quilts that are especially like in this book, or that you see these scrappy quilts, like look at this. It's gorgeous. And these are just little, like probably 1.5-inch squares. You know how many 1.5-inch squares we could get out of just this orange bin? Like probably hundreds. And, it's all just kind of sitting here at the ready. And here's the great news. We already know these are fabrics that you probably love because you've used them once already, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I get sad when a scrap project doesn't use enough scraps. So I'm really excited to see if I can maximize how many scraps I use in these projects.
Hi, Sylvie. Hi, Chris. Hi, Natalie. Yvonne's in from Fort Saskatchewan. Hi, you guys. There's Karen. She failed at her New Year's resolution already, and she bought more fabric. Hey, we hear you, okay? We hear you. Like, I've now taken to buying fabric professionally, so.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous.
Slippery. Anyway. I also want to say that I had some fabulous visitors this week because we are opening, it's kind of open, my quilt shop. Well, it's a craft store. It's a quilt shop craft store that's downstairs. And Donna Branton came with some of her family members earlier in the week, right? Was that? Yeah, it was this week. And it was so great to be able to meet her in person because she does so many of our events. Thank you, Donna, for coming. Charlotte Whittington also the week before did the same thing. Came just because she was passing through Kingston and we're right off the 401. So she just whoop and came in, and it was so fun to have some of our first customers be long time, participants, and everybody becomes like friends around here. So thank you, Donna, for stopping in. Thank you, Charlotte, for stopping in. That was fabulous. We even let them come up, take a little look behind the scenes so they could see the mess. Come on.
What mess?
They were like, huh. Really, everything that's off camera. Like, this is why you're doing this event. Yes, it is. But hey, we're not pretending to be perfect around here. So let's get to some of the advice. Right off the hop, I'm going to talk a little bit about the system that I've been using. And then, Amanda, let's see a little bit of your system.
Absolutely.
Because what I did a few years back was I embroidered, because I thought it was like so cute, these cute little labels on, and these are just plain cardboard boxes. You can see I only face the front of them. It's like shipping boxes that I cut and sized exactly to the shelf size that I had. And they're all like, they had these cubbies, and I was like, I need to maximize the space. They need to fit right in so I don't see any like mess coming above. So that's why I made these. And I didn't want to waste good fabric on the back. So they're kind of forward facing boxes. However, this system has serious flaws. And I don't know about you, Amanda, but this was my real, not my first attempt at organizing. I mean, I at one point just had things in a Rubbermaid bin. And, you sort of graduate from that to this, to, the next thing, right? So hands up if you guys have something just in a Rubbermaid bin. Oh,
I have stuff
off camera.
I still have some of my stuff in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does make sense. And you do think you're doing something, great by saving it. That's good. So let's try to go one step further. And that's sort of where I'm at, which was a few years ago, I made these boxes to maximize the shelf space because the Rubbermaid bin sort of sits on the floor. It's not that, I'm constantly just like digging through it. Some people use drawers in the same way. I see Donna saying she uses drawers. This way I color sorted them. That way, when I was like, oh, I need an orange piece, I could come and, pull from the orange box. Or if I cut something that was orange, here's what I would do. I would basically just shove it down in. And because these were flat right in the shelves, nothing stuck out. So I was constantly like jamming it down and fitting more in and fitting more in. And then I end up with like perfectly good sashing and, you know, pieces like this that I can never find. I mean, this is perfectly good. And there's like 100 of them already cut. I just totally overshot on this quilt, obviously. But you know what I mean? And this could totally be used in something scrappy for sure. So the error of my ways here is that I was shoving it all in. It's not ready to use. And that's what I found to be a problem. And that's why I hardly ever use it. What's your system, Amanda?
So I have like a graduated system, and I've been perfecting it over the years, but you can see behind me here, I have these two bins, and they go in a rolly cart. You know, those Rubbermaid rolly bins?
Yep.
So these are just everything extra in the top two bins, and they're all different sizes. I need to go back through this and organize it. They're all almost all cut square or rectangle. I can see some circles in the bottom. There's a lot of circles in my stash. So like that's my big stuff that isn't currently in my studio. And this is where I found I would run into problems when I would be doing a project and I had all my scraps in my closet, which is across the house, like not very far, but I was like, I'm too lazy. Really, I am that lazy. And so I wouldn't go and get them. And I would just cut into new yardage, which like that's pretty lazy, right? So I have been, since then, I've come up, because I redid my studio last year or the year before, I've been able to perfect my system. And so now I have this drawer.
Ooh, look at this, you guys.
So I have drawers with bins in my studio, and these bins, like they come out and I have lids for them. And so like if I need green, I can take this bin with me and it's contained. Like they don't stay on, but like they're there. So I have colors in this section, and then I have more things on top. And so I have like a warm white and a white, and I've colored them all. And then at the very back, I got to scooch all the way back. I have like, back here are blocks, orphan blocks that I've tested out, or things that I'm just not sure what color they are, because I sort based on the day. And then I also have like, over on the side here, I have Christmas fabric because I don't want it mixed up. Like it's just a little more streamlined now when I have it in these drawers.
And are you always pressing, and are you, doing that kind of thing before you put them in the drawer? So are you taking a bit of care of these scraps, or are you just like finish cutting and put them in?
No, so like I try to keep them fairly pressed and cut square rectangular. Like it doesn't have to be, I get sad when there's parts of fabric that I might cut off that I could use for something. So I just try to square it off the best I can. But what I don't want is like pieces like this drive me bonkers because
we're holding up. Up.
Like those little tails, like they get in the way. They're
because let's face it, we're not using this little tail for anything, and we're not using this tail for anything. So we may as well cut the square out as we're going. And that's part of what the lessons are going to be in the next 2 weeks, is we're going to challenge you to find these pieces in your stash, to press them and square them up, but not just square them up, potentially go a step further and get them organized by size. So if you have the Lori Holt book, she goes into like a 6-step method, and I won't give it all away because it's not really fair to just read out the book for the people who paid money for the book, like fair enough. But we will kind of give you guys some tips on how to start like organizing them, and what I want you to do this week going into next week to get ready for the project. So we've come up with a couple little things we can show you, the do's and don'ts of your fabric sorting. So like we said, don't just use a bin and toss all of the scraps in it. Instead, what we're recommending is to choose a color and sized based storage system. So if that's too much all at once, like it was for me before, I had them just sorted by color. What we're going to challenge you to sort by color and size going forward in the next couple of weeks. We're going to start tonight, but let's get through a couple other do's and don'ts. Amanda, this is another one of mine, is to don't leave gaps in your drawer or shelf space. If you can fit another little bin in there, otherwise, you're just not maximizing your space. So you can see that box that I'm pulling out there with the pinks. There's very little space above that shelf, and that's because I just made those boxes out of extra Amazon boxes and taped the sides. Like, they were free. I just wrapped fabric around it, and then I embroidered those little signs, or the little labels. But you could just literally put a piece of tape on it and label it. But you probably want to be fancy too, I would imagine. Quick question first. Do you suggest color over material type? I was going to try by size and material, knits versus cottons. What do you think, Amanda?
I keep my knits completely separate.
Same.
And really, they're not even organized, because really they're just for, like, a lot of my knit scraps, if they're not big enough to be made into something, they're for, like, setting my serger tension.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I use them for.
It's actually so true. Or like maybe the odd random pocket. It's all you're really going to get, or cuffs, out of a knit scrap, because so often with knits you're making clothes and you need massive pieces, and you end up with these random like shapes because of like the hood or the arms or whatever. And you're like, what can I use this for? And you don't use knits for much else other than like clothing. So unless you're going to use it for clothing, I use my serger to make sure it's working too, which also makes me think I should just donate that to a textile recycling, which brings us to one of our tips, right, Amanda?
What's that? Oh yeah, get rid of your stuff. Don't hold on to it.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not going to use it,
and don't. Yeah.
If you hate it, like, don't treat your fabrics like kids. You don't have to keep them all. Like, you can give them away. Schools, the kindergarten classes love them. Community groups, like anyone doing stuff with kids, they love them for just crafts and fill and whatever. And like some of the textile places that take the shoes, the shirts, the purses and all that, you'll see the bins everywhere. Some of them actually take the scraps and they sell them to a cat toy manufacturer, and they get used to fill cat toys. And then I feel good about it. Like, I'm not a cat person, but I want the cats to have toys.
But you want them to have a fun life. Come on.
That's right.
You want them to have toys.
And if you don't like your fabric scraps, you're not going to use them. So get rid of them.
Yeah. So that's a great tip. Don't keep too many scraps. Donate the surplus. So what we're going to do tonight, and what we can start doing as we're like going through our tips here, is to start sorting your bins. So for example, I'm going to start with this white one. Move my nice book so I don't spill something on it or whatever. Get your bin out, even if it's a big pile on the floor. Get your ironing board like ready. I've got a bottle of flatter here. Maybe you have a spray bottle of water. Flatter like makes everything work really great. And like while we're talking here, let's just start with the pressing, because that's really what needs to happen. Is everything needs to get pressed and color sorted. And so when Joe was asking, color over material type, like, look at this. Come on, Jen.
What did you make?
Well, actually, this is from using dies to cut the fabric. But I mean, why do I keep that middle? You know what I mean? So I'm going to just do myself a favor with something like this. Now I'm going to square it up more after, but let's just get rid of this middle part. And, this is the kind of thing you can do while you're watching a movie, or, dump it out on the floor and put on an audiobook and start tidying your scraps. It's actually pretty fun. I also actually got my kids to do a lot of the ironing because I did some colors already. just to get a feel for how long this was going to take, and getting organized for the Getting Organized event. If you've been following on Instagram, you would have seen the child labor.
It's valid. I used my kids too for stuff like that. It's like, you sort these by color.
Yeah. And you want to know what? When they get involved like that too, they get inspired. And when we went through those boxes, it was kind of fun. It was like going a little trip down memory lane too, right? Because it was like, oh, I remember what I made out of this. I remember what I made out of that. Or, oh, I know that shirt. And you know what I mean? So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I had 2 giant rolly bins, so 5 drawers each. And I went through my whole bin, all of them. And I did exactly what you're doing, is iron them and cut them.
Yeah.
And like, I watched a lot of movies, but it was fine. It was really nice to feel organized.
Yeah, it's a very satisfying feeling. And so let's take a look at something like this. This is the top of what was an advent calendar. I made the advent calendar already. And, I thought it was cute writing. Am I going to use this? Like, should I trim it up? What's your advice here? Should I use that as like some sort of,
if you wanted to use it to do some sort of, what do they call that? The the strip on the end. But they do quilts on them now with just what's the edge of the fabric? Why am I having this problem?
Salvage quilts.
Salvage quilts. You could do that. But what I've been doing is I've been cutting weird fabric into strips, and I can show you later, is like I twist it into this twine. Yes. And I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with it yet, but having a little bit of text, I've done a couple of them with a little bit of text, and it was really cute.
That looks like it could be a rope bowl or a carpet, like just keep going. You could keep going to like make a laundry basket. Like, we did that rope bowl class, right? We learned all about how to like turn that kind of like cording into something pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I just cut like strips. I didn't even use a ruler for a lot of them. I just like willy-nilly like cut strips. I was like, good enough. And so
we are going to recommend sizes to cut, but we're going to be doing that next week, because one thing at a time. So I'm going to go through and start basically challenge you guys to take at least one color. I mean, it's not like you're going to finish this all in one night, but to at least start one color and start pressing it and start deciding keep or donate. If you're going to keep it, iron it and put it with its light colors. I'm going to assume that I'm really not going to use the Marion Bright.
Get rid of it. But like cut off the white part on the top.
I'll be looking for them, I'm sure.
Like,
I know. That's what I was thinking. If I cut the white part off at the top, or I just used Marion Bright and took out the advent calendar part, and then put it on the top of a stocking, now that would look good. See, this is why I'm a hoarder. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave them in.
But like, if it's organized and they're all together, then you know where they are and you know when to get them. It's when they're in a bin and you have no clue. No clue.
It's true. Get them out of the bin. So that's going to be lesson number 1, is to get them out of the bin and start pressing them. So that's a huge tip. Don't hide your fabric. And we're going to work on labeling our bins too. So I did like one step of labeling the color, but I just did that more for show than anything else. Obviously you can see it's orange. It's got orange fabric on the front of the box. Like, but it's cute. It says oranges, like these are the oranges. Okay, fine. However, we're going to go a step further, and inside the orange bin, we're going to challenge you to have some set sizes. This is what Lori Holt recommends for her system, is a few set sizes that you can subcut easily out of. So for example, you can, if you cut like 1 inch or 1 inch, you can't really get 1.5 inch, but maybe you have enough for a 1.5 inch. So like 1.5, 3, because you can cut 2, 5, because you can cut 4 and 3 out of it. So if we stick to some standard sizes that we always know we have, and even if it means cutting off a smidge, you know what I mean? Like maybe you're at 5 3/4 here. And maybe you're like, well, I might as well keep it just in case. She argues, and many argue, it's better to know what size you have than to, because you're never going to know by looking that this is 5 3/4 in 5 years when you pull this out.
No.
However, if you stick with standard sizes and then subcut from those standard sizes and be willing to part with some of, the extra, like if you want this to be a 5-inch strip, and you're willing to part with, 3/4 of an inch. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it comes down to personal choice. Is like everything we do are guidelines, and then you attempt it and you're like, yeah, I really like that. Or, hey, like 3.5 isn't something I ever use. But you know what? I do use 3 a lot, and that half gives me a little bit of wiggle room to trim things up and make sure that it's exactly square. So you just have to start to think about how you use your fabric and what makes sense to you. So if it doesn't make sense to you, then you get to create your own system. But what I like about exploring all these different systems is I start to pick up little things that actually do work, and I adapt them for me. And I think that's where the magic happens, is when you come up with something that's going to work for you like forever.
Well, and I like what this person's saying. Be realistic about your time and the projects you want to make with your life. Like, this is a good point. If I'm not going to use the Merry and Bright, someone else really might. Like, maybe someone's watching who doesn't have a robust stash, but still wants to like make or have scraps. Like, maybe what I should do is a giveaway. Does anybody we could send people a pile of extra scraps, and then you'd have scraps, more scraps too. Now, I'm not telling you, if you already have tons of scraps, to take my scraps, because you'll just be drowning in them. But if you're new to fabric, like maybe we have some people I know who are watching and participating who've been in, let's say, like our Cricut event. And maybe you're more on the paper crafting side of things or on the vinyl side of things, and you're just delving into fabric, then maybe you don't have that many scraps. So maybe a little scrap bag would be a cool giveaway. Who knows? Let me know what you guys think.
Actually, when I started, I bought scrap bags from people online who I liked the fabric that they had, and they would sell them. And that's how I started, which sounds ridiculous, but that's how I started my scrap stash, because I didn't have anything. And so I would be like, oh, I need this color, but I would have nothing because I was so new. And it is a great way to start building your stash. But you can go overboard.
So let's put some guidelines into place when people are trying to decide this week what they keep. So let's take this piece, for example. This is a very super cute fabric. I remember this is on my daughter's headboard of her bed. So I love going down memory lane, but it's just like this cute polka dots. I upholstered her headboard with this quilting cotton and put a big pink vinyl with a Cricut V, because her name's Violet, in the center of it. And this was her bed. Now we've got how much here? I don't know if I have a ruler, about 1.5 inches. Is this piece worth keeping? What do you think, Amanda?
I would actually cut out, if you could get 1.5 inch strip of it, I would cut that out, and the rest is gone.
And then the bottom part that's kind of tailing off here, and this middle part that's a little bit over, and then it becomes a very usable, smaller but usable piece for a log cabin, for example, or you know what I mean. And in the book, I gotta say, what she does with these, she's got 32 patterns in here, which is great, is she tells you how many, grab 15 of your 2.5 inch strips, and because you've already subcut them all, and you're going to be good to go for this whole block. And so and it doesn't matter what color they are, you're just pulling based on the size. And when you're doing a real scrappy quilt, let's say this one, where it really doesn't matter what color it is, you could just pull from all primaries or all pastel colors or all really brights or all the same colorway. As long as it has something to do with red, you could pull it. So you can kind of decide. But I like this because she is saying okay, grab 36 2.5 inch strips And then you're going to subcut from there if that's the one that you want to make. And what's going to be cool in February is that you don't have to make what I'm making or what Amanda's making or what anyone else is making. You can do whatever project you're inspired to make. There's 32 of them in there. We're going to take a few of those quilt blocks and make them into not just quilts, like into other things by just making one block. We're going to make a couple pouches. We're going to make a wall. What did we say? I should go through the list, but we're going to make a bunch of different things. And we're also going to make a quilt. So kind of have a think on what you might want to be inspired to make. The book is Scrappiness, and maybe Amanda, you can find the link and put it on. Scrappiness is happiness, and this is also included in the kit that we have. If you're wanting, it will include your background or your backing fabric, your batting, a bottle of this flatter, and a bunch of other like cool pieces.
I would say, while you're going through your fabrics, you might want to think about some fabrics setting aside into a different pile for fussy cutting projects. So like I have these adorable sloths, and fabrics like this where you have like a main character, you don't necessarily want to cut to a certain size because you might want that main character for a fancy block. So if you start to look at those things, like today, I was able to make this little block, and that little unicorn guy, I have a collection of these unicorns, and they're all different size blocks right now or scraps, because I knew I wanted to fussy cut them. So I wanted them to have random outside borders. So if you have these special novelty kind of fabrics, you might want to create even a different separate pile for them that isn't color-based.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I mean, that would go with the Merry and Bright too. Subcut it if you're only going to use the words, you know what I mean? Yeah. I love, and like that little unicorn could have easily gotten lost on a little, piece like this. So I love that idea to subcut it down. And you still just made it the biggest square you possibly could.
Yeah. And I just made sure that I wasn't, because sometimes I was cutting things and I'm like, why am I cutting it right in the middle of that character? Because the rest of the fabric is kind of meh. But I really want, like those dinos, you want to make sure that you have usable space. So you don't want to end up cutting through one of them when you're like, that was adorable.
Yeah. Yeah. Because really, I love that could be the center of a cute little block. That's a great idea. Love it. Good tips. Good tips. All right, let's go to some more tips. What have we got that we haven't told you guys yet, Karin? Don't keep your scraps together. Color, size, help make choices. So we've kind of gone over this a few times for sure. But what we mean by that in the deeper dive is that when you have things that are sorted by color and by size, not just by one, and as Joe says, and by material, like this is basically going to be all of your quilting cotton. You know what I mean? Take out any, like this one I just pulled out, feels like shirting. It's thicker. It's not quite the same as quilting cotton. So it needs to go in a different bin, because otherwise when you're putting together your scrappy quilt, you're going to maybe have one that's like too thick, and you'll feel the difference for sure.
And when you're sorting stuff, you can resort them later. Like I have a teal, which teal's hard to see on camera, a light blue, and a green, and I don't have enough bins for a teal. Am I going to put it with the green, or am I going to put it with the blue? Well, let me tell you, that's a crisis, because I thought about it for a very long time today. It is now with the blue, but it was with the green. So
I think you went the right way there.
But like sometimes I resort things. I'm like, no, that's more coral than it is pink. And then the next day I'm like, that's actually orange.
Well, and I love, and someone's pointing out, good idea, Amanda, I'm going to keep my Tula pink fabric separate. Yeah. Because wouldn't it be great to just do a scrappy Tula pink? Yeah. And it doesn't matter what it is, or all in one colorway or something like that. And you don't want to have to go digging through the bins. And maybe that will be your motivation, where you're like, yeah, I'm going to do one of these patterns from the book, like a log cabin or a star, whatever it is, but I'm only using Bonnie and Camille, or I'm only using Tula pink, or I'm only, whatever your favorite is.
And when times are tough, that Tula pink especially if you have vintage, it sells for a pretty penny. I made some money a couple years ago because I was over that line and I was like, here you go, world. And people bought it. Like, that's what amazes me is like scraps and things like that. Eventually people are like, no, I want that very specific fabric.
This is the bottom of a shower curtain that I made. Like, what's wrong with me storing this like this? It is literally like a giant hoop. It's serged at the sides. However, there is so much good usable white fabric here, like that's going to make a like decent sized squares. So I'm going to just cut the ends that have been serged. Like I can see like my raggedy serging stitches went back when I used to really stink at serging.
It takes practice. I was using a new serger this week and my floor of my studio was full of scraps, trying to figure out the tension.
Oh, I know. Oh, the tension on the serger. But you eventually get it, and then you're like, wow, this looks good, because serging is so good.
It is. And you can use sergers in your quilts. So
totally.
It's one of my favorite things.
I remember we did a show once at TSC where it was all like quilting with the serger. And because, you know, people want to know what else can I do with the serger, but, you know, the serger is so great at preventing things from unraveling, and they're so fast that it makes very, like, if you use the serger and we're good about it, like you could cut it as you're sewing it and save yourself a whole step.
Yeah, super handy for sure.
Now look at that. This is the bottom of that shower curtain. Look at this.
It's so much better.
Usable. Yeah, but I put that right back in the bin. What's wrong with me? Come on, Jen. Everyone I'm not using, I'm putting back in this stupid bin. Old habits, you guys. It'll be better. It'll be better. Let's hear from you guys too. If you have any systems that are really working for you. I know we had Michael Smith, who was in our promo video, or one of our promo videos. He's the national educator at Janome, and he had done a whole video on how he stores his scraps. And I think he uses a fairly similar system to yours, like with the drawers and the sizes. I'm trying to decide, do I keep after this? Do I keep the boxes? Or do I have to go to a different system so I can see in them a little bit better? What do you think I'd be better off doing, Amanda?
So part of the reason why I have everything in drawers, like in my studio, is if I don't see them, I don't use them. And but I also get really overwhelmed. So I like to have my collection that is smaller in my drawers. I don't have a ton in there. When they get too full, then I put them into the bins in my closet. Or today, some of my colors were getting low and I got to bring out new fabrics. And it also, like, I try to grab a little bit of each thing that I have so that when I start to look for a scrap, I'm like, oh, today I wanted those unicorns. So I went to my bin because I knew I had more of them and I dug those out. So I like to have stuff that is visible and accessible because I'm going to use it, but it's overwhelming to have it all. So I would probably keep your bins, and really, if you sort them in like Ziploc bags in your bin, when you're like, oh, I need that 2.5-inch strip and I'm out in my accessible bin, I can refill it with what's in the bin that I have in the back.
Right. It's a good question. What size is considered a scrap? And I mean, Amanda, we've talked about this a little bit, but what I'm going to recommend is anything smaller than 1.5 inches is too small. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't keep anything that is, probably around 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
And then it gets sorted. I have right behind me, I have this giant bin on the bottom, and that is full of scraps that, one, are too small for me to use for anything else, but then also are ugly. If I hate them, they go in there. And I'm going to use those as fill for some projects. I've been thinking about making like one of those stools, like a tuft stool. There's a pattern for one with strips.
Almost like a beanbag chair, but like a...
Yeah. And so I'm going to use those as fill for that. It'll be heavier than all get out, but it'll make me happy knowing that my scraps are being used for something.
But also, if it's a piece of furniture like that, you want it to be heavy. You want it to have that weight so that it's not flung around the floor every time the dog tail hits it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For sure.
So
I think it's also important to note that there's sizes that are too big to be considered scraps also. And for me, that's, anything bigger than a fat quarter. Like, you don't want to put fat quarters in here. You want to fold them nicely or put them somewhere else, like in your actual stash. And then, so if it's cut that way, it's a fat quarter. I'm trying to think like what would be too big. I think anything over about 7.5 inches is too big to be a scrap. What do you think, Amanda?
yeah, if it's wider than my 6-inch ruler, like significantly wider than that, then I no longer consider that a scrap. And when I went through my bins today, I found quite a few. Not all of these are, but then I got a new bin, and these are for my large scraps, because what I find is, this is from IKEA. IKEA bins are my life. I go there and spend all my money. And I fold them as nicely as I can to fit that bin. But if I put like a fat quarter or something small in with my yardage, it gets lost. So now I think I'm going to get a bunch more of these, and I think they're like $3 each, maybe.
Yeah,
and
they're not that.
No, they're not expensive. And then I'm going to keep anything that size in there, and I will, because I'm obsessed, I will color code them and make them look like a rainbow, and I will have a shelf or something with those on it so that I know when I need something a little bit bigger, that it's not going to be lost in my stash.
Faye is saying she has her scraps in Ziploc bags by light colors. It's so frustrating to find what I was looking for. I mean, this may as well be a Ziploc bag with the colors in it, because literally you're like, where is, and then you've pulled it all out, and good luck keeping anything in there that that won't wrinkle. Good question, Tammy. What is a fat quarter? Hold on. Let me grab one. It's
Tammy, I
measures
wish
18 by 22 inches is a fat quarter, and it's basically like a meter or a yard. It's a yard of fabric, and instead of cutting it from selvage to selvage, it gets cut like fat ways, like this, down the middle and across the middle, and then you're left with what's called a fat quarter. And it's 18 by 22, sometimes it's 21, but it's about this big. Look at this cute fabric. Honestly, this is why I buy so much stinking fabric. Anyway, so this is a fat quarter, and if you were to put another one like over here, another one up here, and another one over here, then you'd have a yard of fabric. So you can see it's cut up the middle and it's cut across the middle. And that's a fat quarter. And a lot of patterns, you'll see them say fat quarter friendly. And that means when you're reading the pattern, if you've got pre-cuts like this, fat quarters often will come in bundles like this with like a ribbon on it. And it just makes you want it so much. They know what they're doing, the marketing of these. They put them together in this great little stack and, tie a bow on it and charge the world. But whatever, it's beautiful. We love it. And if your pattern says fat quarter friendly, you can just pull one and you'll have enough material in a fat quarter to use for that pattern. So that's a fat quarter. I hope that helps. Now,
yeah, and if you're ever buying online or in a shop, if you don't specify you want a fat quarter and you ask for a quarter yard, they will just what is going on? The Michael Jackson era.
Get into the groove, boy, you've got to prove. That's what it looks like, right? Like when a Madonna, like sheer glove. That's what it reminded me of. This was a blouse, and the blouse, it was actually like a sheer turtleneck. And I don't know why, and it had like a big stain on it or something. And I was like, but this, I could use it someday.
Toss it.
Bye. I'm being ruthless.
Someone was asking earlier about the fabric recyclers in Ontario. And all I know is my area, and I'm in like the Hamilton area, is the bins with like, they look like almost a recycling symbol on them, and it says textile waste diverters. And those are I just drive around looking for those bins because they used to have a locator, but it became problematic. And I just drive around looking for them and then toss them in there.
What would you do here, Amanda? Square it up, or would you do a bunch of strips?
So because I use so many circles right now, I keep the circles in my stash, but I know that's not the norm. So I would square it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a tough call. And then sometimes when you square things, you can square them in a way that you still have extra that you can cut. Like sometimes it gets a little bit, I get overboard cutting things. I'm like, if I do it this way, then I could get this much more of it.
Yeah. So this is a good example. I'm starting to pull out a bunch of like knits here. So this is like a ribbed knit.
Oh, nice.
But I might have enough here if I was doing like I do so many demos like on TV and stuff. So I do need to keep stuff for that. And, I could get probably like if I was making pajama pants or something like that, a good couple little baby cuffs out of this. But I'm never going to find it if it's in with the quilting cotton. No. So definitely, Joe, I'm going to put this in with have a separate bin for knits. And then Amanda, do you think for the knits, like something like this, just put all the knits in one and go by the same system, like color, or just put all the knits in a bin, we'll deal with the knits later?
For now, I would say this is going to be stressful enough and enough work. Yeah. So just put all the knits in a bin. But I like to group my knits. I try to keep them like the same kind of thickness because I'm often not using scraps. I'm using them for demos and I'm not using them based on the color. And it's more of like, I need a thick knit or I need a thin knit. So I separate it like that.
Yeah. This is faux leather.
Oh.
I mean, I kind of like this like for applique, like you could cut a little heart out of this. Now, maybe I would cut this here so then I have 2 strips and a square. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. You can iron faux leather, by the way. Just be careful that it doesn't melt too much and always do it on the wrong side.
I melted a minky blanket.
Oh. It always smells so bad when you iron it. I always think I'm getting poisoned.
Yeah.
Probably am.
At least it's
flat now.
I gave my friend a blanket with rickrack around the edge.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, Megan, do not iron the rickrack because I know her and she irons everything. And I'm like, don't. She's like, thank you for telling me. I was like, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it's so plasticky.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about white? So often white is the background fabric. Or maybe we talk a little bit about low volume and high volume and what that means. Because I can pull a couple pieces here and, if you have an enormous stash, maybe high volume, low volume solids is something that you want to consider. Just to be clear, like let's pull a couple prints here.
Those are hilarious.
And talk about whether they're high volume, low volume, and the different things that they can be used for. Because if you choose something, and high volume basically means like it's busy. So you can find an even bigger, busier one. Like it's gonna draw your eye. Like it probably should be like the star of the show. And then you can have something that is low volume or like a medium. Do you say medium volume? Do I? I don't know.
I don't know.
Mid?
Sure.
That, maybe you want to pick and maybe you don't, depending on what you're using it for. But you want to, if you're the background fabric of your scrappy quilt, and we'll get into this during the free February classes. But this one, for example, if I show you like way up close on the cover of the book, it's hard to see, but she's using these are not whites. These are low volume whites. And every single one of them is different. All the whites are different. And so if you're doing something like that, which truly looks very scrappy. You don't want to end up with a mix of, really loud prints, even though they have a white background, like the emojis, with, something that is like a very low volume. So this is louder and this is lower. So this is a high volume and this is a low volume. And it doesn't really have that much to do with the size. It has more to do with like how big and bold and eye-catching it is. Is that a proper explanation? What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, like we can classify fabric in so many different ways, but really what happens is when we go to make a project, we really need to think through how the fabric is going to look in the final product. And so if you are looking at this pile of scraps here, for me, what stands out, even the top left-hand corner, is some blue on white in your pile there. Yeah, that stuff there. So like that pops out. So I wouldn't want to use it as a background fabric unless I'm using it with other things that look like that.
So should we have a pile? Like this should probably go with the blues, not with the whites.
Yeah, I'd put it with blues. And I classify things based on what my eye sees first. And that typically is what color is more dominant.
Yeah.
And but like the polka dots that you have below it, I would mix that in with some of the other whites and use it in a background, but know that it's going to pop a little bit more than the rest. But it doesn't need super bright.
Could we take this was Ruby's grade or Violet's grade 2 picture day dress?
Aw.
No. Where did the babies go? They have so many, now they wouldn't dare wear something I made them. Anyway, should we have a bin, and we'll get to it next week and decide, of background fabrics then, low volume background fabrics? What's your thought on that?
So I think it depends on what fabrics you use. Like I have 2 distinct white piles. I have a warm white and a cool white because I tend to use both of those separately. And I have different colors I like to use with each of those. But the difference in the whites in those piles are still there. So when I use them in a scrappy project, I still can tell that they're scrappy. But I don't have a ton of fabrics that are white with other things in it. So I don't really need something that's separate. But if that's something that you have a lot of, then maybe make a separate pile. And that's why I have a separate multicolor pile, because it really doesn't read like anything, but I do have a chunk of those fabrics.
And, I also want you guys to think of things other than full quilts. A full quilt sometimes takes like a year to make, and maybe that's the idea, that you're going to use up tons of scraps. Or maybe to start, we're going to start Free February with a really small little scrap project where you just use a little bit of your scraps. But it also means that, hey, you didn't have to go and buy anything new. You have your new fabric or your, different like that, your purchase or your fabric that you haven't cut into yet, still intact, and you were still able to make something. And if you've already used a fabric yourself in like your main project, scraps are like great gifts to give people, because you might not want that fabric for like a pencil case, for example, but someone else will like die for that.
Yeah. Like I was working today.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was working today on a little heart bunting for Valentine's Day. Aww. And these are just all from my scrap bin. So like I always pull them for these little projects where I don't need a huge chunk. And so I was making this. It's a prototype. It needs a little work, but we're getting there.
I love it. Could black be low volume?
Oh,
yeah. I mean, the black would have to be paired with the same black in the background to get mixed together. And in that case, it probably wouldn't be that scrappy. It would be pretty purposeful. So I'm going to say no. because the chances of that happening out of a scrap bin are pretty slim. That doesn't mean you don't save your black scraps. For sure you could. But as a background, you'd have to be careful that you didn't end up with sort of like a real, you didn't know where to look. And if you're going to do that, hey, it's a look. Go for it if you've got tons of black. But I wouldn't say it could be low volume. What do you think, Amanda?
It always feels really loud. You could have like a gray that's low volume, but black always feels loud because it's black.
It's black.
Like
it's going to catch your eye.
Gold. But like,
yeah.
I don't necessarily have a lot of low volume fabric, but what I have is near solids. So it's like a solid fabric with little things on it. Like this one has little X's this way, and these ones are different. So I have these, and then I like to keep these in with my solids. Actually, most of my fabrics are all together. But like looking at something like this, then we get into how sometimes a solid fabric will start to take over, and then this will help break it up.
Yep, that's a great tip. That's a great tip. Faye saying scraps are great to do a test block instead of cutting yardage. Yes.
Yes.
I always have intentions of doing test blocks, but I always cut my yardage. And then I always mess it up. Like when I'm doing the classes for you guys, like I try to make the quilts like a couple times. And I end up trying to use like ugly fabric, when now I'm going to be able, if I can get all of these organized, I'm going to be able to pull from this kind of thing instead. It's going to be much better because, you know, remember the one we did the Lottie in like this bright pink, and it ended up looking hideous, honestly. And it's too bad because we just used this bright pink as the background fabric when that pink would have been lovely in something else. So it was kind of a big waste.
Yeah.
But
and I have problems if it's not pretty, I don't like it. So when I'm developing like a pattern, if I often want to use a whole bunch of random fabric that I don't care about because I feel like it's appropriate, but then I don't ever like what I'm making. So I have to start again and find colors. It's not necessarily the final colors, but I find things that I enjoy so that I enjoy the whole process of making that pattern. It's a double-edged sword.
Yes, for sure it is. This looks like maybe not quite a fat quarter, but almost fat quarter size. So, but it's also a low volume white, which, you know, would be great to pair up with some of these other ones. So just because you have it in a fat quarter doesn't mean you can't use it. In fact, shop your fat quarter stash. Always shop your stash, and mix them in with some of your scrappy stuff. So I am going to fold this like a fat quarter, and I'll keep it with the fat quarters, but I'm going to shop the fat quarters when we get to doing the background, because I definitely want to do one that has a low volume white background. Okay, what sort of last tips can we be giving? We've been going more than an hour already, so if you have any extra questions for us this week, we'll basically have set out what we'd like you to do this week is to start pulling out your bins, or however you're organizing your fabric right now, your scraps, and anything that's larger than a fat quarter gets folded up and put in a fat quarter stash or around your yardage. And we didn't really talk about how we store our yardage, but that's because we're talking about scraps during this event. But anything smaller than like 1.5 meters, I put on those comic book cardboards, and I file them like vertically. And that works for me. And I have like a couple of systems. If you watch my great craft room cleanup from last year, you'll see how I store yardage and fat quarters. But we didn't really tackle the scraps during that. So what I want you to do this week is pull out your bins, start pressing, because it's a huge job. And now you can press and then cut, and maybe that makes quicker work out of it for you, depending on the space. Like right here, I don't have quite enough space to iron and then cut without everything getting in the way. So I'm making piles of fabrics that are pressed, and then I can switch. And if I'm getting bored, then I'll switch to cutting. And if I'm getting bored of that, I can switch back to ironing.
Yeah.
So, but you do whatever your brain is most comfortable with. I'm seeing lots of people saying they like to keep their flannel separate. I would do that too. I wouldn't probably incorporate flannel into, well, maybe, I don't know. You could piece the back with a few pieces of flannel. That'd be cute.
Yeah, I go with if I'm using flannel, it's for a specific project. And so I take the extra flannel and I make it into washcloths. And the scraps from that I will put in with my normal scraps because I will use them in a quilt. And that's what I primarily do. But if you won't put them in a quilt that isn't a flannel quilt, I don't think it's helpful to have them with the rest of your scraps.
Yeah. I am finding some great low volume whites. I'm like happy about this. I am happy about this. Yeah, so we take a break next week and we're back the following week. So you've got 2 weeks now to get ironing and get sorting by color. And when we come back, we are going to size things up and start organizing them in various methods using either drawers or bins or boxes. It doesn't necessarily matter what system you adopt in terms of how you're storing it. But so long as you've got the system in place. And what we're recommending is, okay, hold on. This is only 1 inch.
Keep it.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
We just said anything smaller than 1.5 inches.
I know, but like that would be because it's white, and this is my thing with it is like these on my little block today. This isn't an inch. This final thing, it's not. Maybe it is just an inch. It is just an inch, and because you're talking about things that you're going to use in borders, I would keep the whites or your background fabrics that you normally gravitate to. Okay. But not anything else.
Yay, permission. Man, I'm finding it like, gosh, don't let me buy any more white fabric. I have enough. Like I literally have enough.
But like I started focusing on using my white fabrics in my projects that I have in my scrap bin. And I actually no longer have any more bright white to add to my scrap bin. So I have to start cutting into my yardage.
Let me ask you, look at like perfectly good white squares. What about different mixing? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter with a scrappy quilt, but you know, sometimes there's a real feel difference between brands of fabric or like big box store fabric versus like quilt shop store fabric. Would you put like a white that's a little bit scratchier, a little bit tougher next to like, you know, an art gallery fabric's white that's like super soft? You know what I mean? What do you think?
In a scrappy quilt, 100%.
Yeah.
In any other quilt, because I will use my scraps in a quilt that's not technically a scrappy quilt, and then I will not use fabric that feels weird.
Yeah, some of this fabric, I can tell this must have been in the sale bin because it feels very, very thick or like, you know, textury, but it's not like poplin or shirting. It's just not great, you know.
Well, and I had some fabric printed and I didn't like the quality of it, but it came with a huge like white space that I kept. But I know every time I pull it out of the scrap bin, I'm like, oh, that's that crappy fabric I don't like.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. So if you don't like it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're just holding on to it. And unless you know that, you know what, when my kids or grandkids want to do something, this is what I pull out for them. And so if that's the case, put that in its own bin and let them just take anything they want out of that ever. And you never have to worry that they're getting something that you might want to use.
Yeah. And Faye, I think you should decide as you're going through what you keep and what you're going to toss or give away. Yeah. But if you're on the fence, keep it. Keep it for the next stage and then make a decision as you're cutting it. But if you get there and you're like, I didn't really like it before and I still don't like it, get rid of it. Like you're not going to use it. Yeah, or you can keep it just for the crappy stuff. Like when my machine's acting up and I need to troubleshoot, I grab crappy fabric to run it through, like not crappy quality, but fabric I don't like. So I can run it through my machine and I don't feel like I'm wasting it.
Yep. This is just a giveaway. Nope. I love seeing some of these and like
Oh.
remembering the projects.
Yes.
I love, like, look, like this is a good example of like sniffing around,
Yes.
you know, a feature. Well, we got a little close to the edge here.
That's okay. You can always piece a piece on there.
Yeah. This was the shower curtain. All right, we've kept everyone long enough. If you guys don't have any more questions, yes, you can rewatch the live for sure. And we will stay tuned to your emails because we'll be sending out some reminders about when we're on again next. But I believe the way we scheduled it was what for January we would do this week, skip next week, and then do the following week to prep for free February. So again, we are sorting by color. We're not cutting yet. I mean, if you're ready to cut, you can. But next week we'll go through some really good sizes, and you know, do you fold them? Do you not fold them? How big should your bin be? Like we'll do a little bit more of that fussy cutting. Like let's cut that out. Like should I cut that hole as a strip? Because you never know how big you need it. We'll go over all that kind of stuff next week when we get to the cutting phase. But if you can get yourself to a point where you are sitting on some piles that are a little bit more organized like this, like now we've got some soft pinks. Now we've got a pile of all pressed, you know, other pinks. You know, there's a few where it's like, okay, that maybe could go in that pile. This is more of a low volume, maybe, you know what I mean? I can do a little bit more of a sort, and we can talk about that next week too. If you have questions throughout the week as you're pressing and sorting, you can leave them here on this page, or please join the, some of you are watching from the Homemade Facebook group. That group is fabulous because everybody in there is so helpful. And even if it's not me or one of the Homemade team, you get your questions answered pretty quick in that group.
Yes.
And it's not like the kind of place where you're getting like 1 billion posts per day. Like you can post it and legit get an answer to your question pretty quick. So yeah, Amanda, thanks for all of your tips and tricks. Is there anything else you want to show us or leave us with before we sign off tonight?
No, but like have fun visiting with your fabric. Like I think
yeah, that's what I feel like is happening.
Yeah, is sometimes I go through fabric and I'm like, oh, I forgot I made this project. And it's just a really nice time to think about all the things that you've done, but also all the things that you can do. Sometimes I find a new fabric that I forgot about, new to me again, and I'm like, oh, I could really use it in this. So start dreaming and just having fun with it.
And I kind of like, it sounds a little hokey, but like I'm kind of like when I see some of these, like kind of proud of myself. Like,
yeah,
man, I really made a lot of things. And like I remember getting this balloon fabric and loving it so much and holding on to it because I didn't want to cut into it at all. But then someone said, don't dye with your fabric. And so I was like, I gotta go use the balloon fabric. And I made my daughter's lunchbox out of it, like a little House on the Prairie one, like a drawstring, and it was so cute. And I was like, see, even though when I bought this fabric, I loved it so much, I didn't know what I was going to use it for. It was, you know, don't dye with your fabric.
Absolutely.
Oh, someone's saying, I'm not a quilter, but you've me thinking of ways to store my stash of material for my sewing projects. 100%. It doesn't have to be quilting. In fact, you know, the first couple of projects in our free February event, they're not quilts at all. They're just little like pouches and hangings and little like cute like projects that you can just, you know, they don't put a huge dent in your stash, but it's something. And I love the scrappy look. So just sewing the act of sewing it together and seeing it turn into something else, it's a different feeling than when you just cut it and make it. Because you don't know what it's going to look like at first. And then when you see the finished project, it's usually better than you think, especially if you're going to follow some of our tips that we're going to get to on coordinating colors and, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And like, I just was thinking, I'm currently working on a quilt, but any project where you can gather little bits of all your favorite fabrics that have the best memories, and who cares if they don't go together?
Mm-hmm.
When you make stuff that has great memories with it, you're going to love it. And it's a really cool way to put together like scrappy things. Like I went through a quilt with a lady this year, and she had a story about every single piece of fabric in the quilt. And it was so sweet to listen to all the stories.
I like that idea. I like that idea that each one is like a favorite, not just a, I don't know where that came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe your background or whatever could be a, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it is nice to like elicit some of those memories as you're looking at that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate you all being here. If you have any questions, like I said, you can put it in the group. I hope you're following both Amanda and I on social media. I know there's lots of new people here tonight, but we'll be posting on Instagram and Instagram stories, and of course here on Facebook. So please follow us on those channels too. Amanda, do you want to tell people where they can find you?
I am on Instagram mostly as My Fabric Heart. And I've just jumped into the tablet world, the TikTok world, and I'm Fabric Heart there.
And okay, I've got a TikTok account also, which right now I'm mostly just spying on my daughters to make sure. Because I don't really need like a whole other like venue to like put stuff up on. But sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, just putting one over here and then it transfers to all the places. So I think predominantly most of the people that we're interacting with, you know, are most comfortable with Facebook. But if you guys are liking TikTok, hey, let us know, because maybe I'll make more of an effort, not just be like a sleuth on there. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Amanda. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.